They didn't just complain. They didn't just send letters. They didn't just try to scare me with fines. They built a wall, an 8-foot steel barricade, brand new and still smelling like hot metal, went up across the only driveway into my 40-acre ranch like they were sealing off a prison yard. I rolled up in my dusty truck and just froze there, gripping the wheel, staring at a fresh Nenotre SEMG sign they'd bolted straight into my fence post like it belonged to them. Diesel hung in the air. Gravel was torn up from the equipment tracks. The weld marks were still bluish, like the thing hadn't even had time to cool down. And standing on the other side of it, smiling like she'd been waiting for this moment her whole life, was HOA President Celeste Wainwright. Spotless boots, beige coat, clipboard tucked against her chest like a weapon. She didn't shout. She didn't have to. "Your livestock is lowering property values," she said, calm and certain. "Until you remove the cattle, the gate stays locked." That's when I realized this wasn't about rules. This was about control. What Celeste didn't know was that while she was busy fencing me out, I'd already made a quiet purchase. 2 acres most people would call useless. The only 2 acres that control the only entrance gate into their entire subdivision. They locked me out. So I decided to teach them what locked out really feels like. If you want to hear more true stories like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button to HOA Gone Wild and tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? I'm Cole Mercer, a 3rd-generation rancher in a place called Juniper Ridge, tucked into Redtail County, Montana. It's the kind of town where the grocery clerk knows your dog's name, where folks wave from passing trucks, and where the wind always carries a mix of pine, diesel, and fresh-cut hay. Life here runs on routine and memory. People don't rush unless something's gone wrong. My ranch isn't a side project or a retirement dream. It's the last solid thing my dad left me, and after my wife passed, it became more than land. It became my anchor. When everything else felt like it might drift away, the ranch stayed put. My days start before sunrise with coffee, so strong it bites back, boots on gravel, and the sound of cattle shifting in the half-dark. I check water troughs, mend fence, count calves, and fix whatever broke overnight. It's honest work. It's loud, dirty, and unpredictable. It's also the exact life people claim they want when they say they're moving out to the country. That dream arrived in the form of Foxglove Bluffs. Almost overnight, a shiny 200-home subdivision appeared on the ridge above my lower pasture. Big houses, perfect lawns, stone entry signs with scripted lettering. The developer sold wide open views and peaceful rural living, but what they really sold was a fantasy, ranch country without ranching. They wanted sunsets and silence, not cattle and tractors. They wanted the view without the work. At first, it was easy to shrug off. A new neighbor stopped by to say my cows were too close to the fence line. Someone called the sheriff because my tractor lights were on late during calving season. A woman posted photos on a community page, zoomed in just right, making it look like my pasture was some kind of industrial operation instead of a family ranch that had been there for generations. I let it slide. People need time to adjust, I told myself. Then the Homeowners Association elected Celeste Wainwright. She showed up one afternoon in spotless boots that had never touched mud and a pressed coat that probably cost more than my monthly feed bill. She smiled like we were old friends and stood just far enough back from the fence to avoid dust. "We just want harmony," she said, voice soft, pleasant. "The residents are concerned. There's a certain tone people use when they already think they've won." She had it. I tried to meet her halfway. I explained that cattle graze, cattle make noise, and ranches don't shut down because someone moved in later and decided they preferred silence. I told her this land was here long before Foxglove Bluffs and would still be here long after trends changed. She nodded, smiled, took mental notes. A week later, I got my first letter, not from the county, not from the state, from the HOA. At first, I laughed. It felt ridiculous, like getting a parking ticket from a neighbor. But then I read it again. They claimed part of my driveway, encroached on a Foxglove Bluffs easement. They demanded I stop commercial agricultural traffic during quiet hours. They cited rules I'd never agreed to, written by people who didn't own an inch of my land. Then came the fines. Small at first, just enough to be annoying, enough to make a point. I called the HOA office, expecting a receptionist or a voicemail. Celeste answered on the second ring like she'd been waiting. "This is your final warning," she said calmly, almost kindly. "You can either cooperate or we will escalate." There it was again, that word, escalate. At the time, I didn't fully understand what it meant to her. I thought it meant more letters, more fines, maybe some legal posturing. I didn't yet understand that Celeste didn't see the HOA as a neighborhood organization. She saw it as a weapon. Within days, complaints multiplied. Agencies started showing up. Neighbors stopped making eye contact in town. I could feel the pressure building, slow and deliberate, like she was tightening a vise one turn at a time. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about rules. It wasn't about noise. It wasn't even about cattle. It was about power. Celeste believed that paperwork, confidence, and volume could override history. She believed that if she pushed hard enough, long enough, I'd give up, sell, leave, make the problem disappear. And for the first time since Foxglove Bluffs arrived, I realized something important. She wasn't testing my patience. She was testing how much of my life she could take before I pushed back. And I was about to learn just how far she was willing to go when someone refused to move. The escalation didn't creep in slowly. It hit all at once, like someone flipped a switch and decided it was time to crush me. First came the new story they started telling. Suddenly, my cattle weren't just noisy or inconvenient. They were a health threat. According to posts popping up in Foxglove Bluffs groups, my manure was supposedly contaminating community water. Someone even claimed their kid got sick because of runoff from my pasture. None of it was true, but truth didn't matter anymore. What mattered was fear. Residents began posting dramatic photos and videos online. One woman filmed my cows drinking from the creek at sunset and layered it with ominous music, like she was exposing a toxic waste dump instead of livestock doing what livestock have done forever. The comments filled up fast. Words like dangerous, disgusting, unacceptable. I barely recognized my own land in the way they talked about it. Then Celeste took the next step. She hired private security. Not a friendly neighborhood patrol. Not a guy in a reflective vest waving cars through. These were men in tactical gear with radios clipped to their shoulders, boots planted wide, eyes constantly scanning. They posted up along the fence line like my ranch was a hostile border. Within a week, a small guard shack appeared near the entrance to Foxglove Bluffs, and a new camera was mounted high enough to stare straight down my driveway. Every time I pulled in or out, that lens followed me. I tried talking to one of the guards one morning. He looked young, tired, the kind of guy who probably took the job because he needed steady pay. I kept my voice calm, hands visible. "Can you tell me why you're filming my property?" I asked. He shifted uncomfortably and stared past my shoulder. "Mom says we're not allowed to engage," he muttered. Mom. That's what they called her. Not president. Not director. Mom. Like she ran a private operation. That was when the fines really started pouring in. Every single day, another envelope appeared. Noise violations, visual nuisance citations, unauthorized agricultural equipment. One fine claimed my hay bales were not aesthetically stored. Another cited my cattle for being visible from community walking trails, as if livestock were some kind of offensive display. At first, I laughed. I mean, you have to, right? If you don't laugh, you scream. But then I read closer. The letters mentioned Liens. That's when the laughter stopped. This wasn't about irritation anymore. Celeste wasn't trying to scare me into silence. She was trying to suffocate me financially, drown me in paperwork, force me into selling just to make it end. She wasn't playing neighborhood politics. She was trying to bury me. That's when I hired Holly Sutter. Holly walked into my kitchen like she'd been there 100 times before. Briefcase down, glasses on, eyes already scanning the stack of letters I'd laid out on the table. She didn't rush. She didn't sigh. She read everything, pulled out a pen, and highlighted 3 lines across multiple pages. Then she looked up at me. "They don't have authority over you," she said evenly. "But they're acting like they do. And if they keep filing complaints with agencies, they can make your life very expensive." That was the understatement of the year. Within days, county offices were getting flooded. Fish and wildlife inspectors showed up asking about runoff. Environmental officials walked my land with clipboards, asking the same questions over and over. Everything checked out, but the visits kept coming. Even town felt different. The feed store owner, a guy I'd known for years, suddenly kept conversations short. He glanced around while ringing me up, like being seen talking to me might put him on a list. Neighbors who used to wave now crossed the street or pretended not to notice me. That's when I realized something important. Celeste's strongest weapon wasn't fines. It wasn't guards. It wasn't even paperwork. It was isolation. She was turning the community against me piece by piece, rewriting the story until I wasn't a rancher anymore. I was a threat, a problem, someone better avoided. One afternoon, I drove into town and noticed 2 women whispering outside the post office. When I walked past, one of them went silent mid-sentence, eyes wide like she'd just seen something dangerous. That was the moment it really sank in. Celeste had made herself the narrator, and I was the villain in her version of events. I didn't know how far she was willing to go yet, but I found out soon enough. I had been gone most of the day delivering a trailer load of hay to a neighboring county. When I turned onto my road that evening, something felt wrong immediately. Tire tracks cut deep into the gravel. Fresh debris scattered near the entrance. Then I saw it. My driveway was blocked, not by cone tape, by steel. A massive wall stood where my entrance used to be, posts sunk deep into the ground, panels welded together like they'd planned this for weeks. It wasn't temporary. It wasn't symbolic. It was permanent, looking, intentional. And standing on the other side of it, hands folded neatly, face calm and satisfied, was Celeste Wainwright. She smiled at me like she'd just completed a land grab. And in that moment, staring at that wall, I finally understood exactly who she was. And exactly what kind of fight she'd started. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't threaten her. I didn't give her the reaction she was clearly waiting for. I parked the truck, shut the door, and walked straight up to the wall. The steel was cold and sharp-edged, still new enough to smell like fresh weld and burned paint. It didn't belong there. My cattle stood a few yards behind me, shifting their weight, snorting softly, uneasy in that way animals get when something in their world suddenly changes. Celeste watched me like she expected fireworks. Instead, she tapped her clipboard with one perfectly manicured nail and spoke in that calm, rehearsed tone. "You've been notified repeatedly," she said. "Your operation is incompatible with the community." "Incompatible," I repeated slowly, tasting the word. "You mean you want it gone?" Her smile widened just a fraction. The kind of smile people wear when they believe they're finally being honest. We want what's best for property values. There it was. Not safety, not health, not harmony, money. Holly arrived less than an hour later, stepping out of her car with that same steady calm she always carried. She took in the wall, the welds, the fence posts, then turned her attention to Celeste. She asked one question. Just one. Who approved construction on property you don't own? Celeste didn't hesitate. We have an easement, she said smoothly. We're within our rights. That word again. Rights. Holly didn't argue. She didn't challenge her. She leaned slightly toward me and spoke under her breath. Don't interrupt her. Let her keep talking. People like this always tell on themselves. So I stayed quiet, and Celeste talked. She talked about how the board had voted unanimously. She talked about residents being tired of looking at livestock. She talked about how they'd already consulted an environmental specialist who backed up their so-called health concerns. She talked like someone delivering a victory speech, confident that paperwork and confidence made her untouchable. She never once mentioned permits. She never once mentioned property boundaries. While she was busy performing authority, I was already thinking past the wall. Because ranchers learn something early in life: land disputes aren't won with shouting matches. They're won with documents, surveys, records that don't care who's smiling the hardest. The next morning, I drove straight to the county records office. The building smelled like old paper and dust, the kind of place where history sat quietly on shelves and waited for people patient enough to look. An older clerk named Dale Hennings listened to my story without interrupting, eyebrows slowly creeping upward as I talked. Foxglove Bluffs, he muttered when I finished. Those folks think the ridge came with a crown. I asked him for everything tied to their entrance road. The gate. Any easement that touched my driveway or crossed my land. Dale disappeared into the back for a long time. Long enough that I started wondering if this was going to be another dead end. When he came back, he dropped a thick folder on the counter and gave me a look that said he'd seen this movie before. "Hope you like reading," he said. That's where I found it. Buried beneath decades of zoning updates and development paperwork was an agreement dated long before Foxglove Bluffs ever existed. It outlined access rights to the ridge, specifically the only access corridor, and attached to that agreement was something small, almost easy to miss: a 2-acre parcel sitting like an island near where the modern gatehouse now stood, a parcel tied directly to something called the Gate Operations Easement. I read it twice, then a third time. In plain language, it meant this: whoever owned that 2-acre parcel controlled how the gate functioned. Maintenance, operating procedures, emergency overrides, everything. The gate didn't belong to the HOA. The HOA merely used it. My stomach tightened as I flipped to the ownership page. The parcel wasn't listed under the HOA. It wasn't listed under the developer. It belonged to an elderly man named Clifford Rains. I sat there for a long moment, letting the weight of that sink in. All the noise, all the threats, all the steel and guards and letters. Celeste had built her entire power play on the assumption that no one would ever look this far back. I copied the documents, thanked Dale, and walked out into the sunlight with a strange calm settling over me. Not anger, not panic, clarity. I found Clifford's address before I even reached my truck, and before Celeste could send another warning, another fine, or another smiling threat, I headed out to meet the man who didn't even realize he was holding the key to her entire kingdom. Clifford Rains lived just outside town in a weathered trailer that had clearly been there longer than most of the subdivisions around it. Wind chimes hung from the awning, clinking softly in the breeze, and old farm tools were nailed to the siding like trophies from another era. It felt less like clutter and more like a quiet declaration: I was here first. He opened the door with a narrow, suspicious squint, eyes sharp despite his age. Then his gaze dropped to my boots, my hat, the dust still clinging to my jeans, and something in his expression eased. "You the rancher the Ridge folks keep yappin' about?" he asked. "That's me," I said. "And I think you own something they've been lying about." He let out a short, barking laugh. "Wouldn't surprise me one bit." Inside, the place was small but tidy, coffee already brewing like he'd been expecting company someday. We sat at a scarred kitchen table, and within minutes it became clear Clifford wasn't now RV or out of the loop. He was quiet, observant, and deeply tired of people with money. Acting like Redtail County was something they'd purchased along with their view. He told me the developer had come knocking years earlier, offering what they called good money for his 2 acres. They wanted him to sign away the easement rights tied to it, real casual, like as if it were nothing more than paperwork cleanup. They kept calling it useless land, Clifford said, tapping a finger against the table, but they sure wanted it awful bad for useless. He refused every offer. Then I told him everything, about the wall, about the fines, about the fake health scare and the security guards. I pulled out my phone and showed him photos of the steel barrier welded across my driveway, tightened. "They built on your land?" he asked slowly. "Without a court order?" "Yep." He leaned back in his chair, silent for a long moment, eyes fixed on the ceiling, like he was replaying old conversations in his head. When he finally spoke, his voice was firm. "Son, if you're asking to buy that parcel, you better understand what you're buying." "I do," I said. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something close to steady ground beneath my feet. "I'm not buying leverage. I'm buying my way out of this." We met at the title office 2 days later. Holly handled everything, precise and calm as ever. Clifford read every page slowly, glasses low on his nose. When he finished, he pushed the papers back toward us and laid out one condition. "You use it clean," he said. "No stunts that hurt families, no blocking ambulances, no turning folks into collateral damage." He looked straight at me. "I ain't helpin'. You become the villain they're pretendin' you are." I respected that more than I could say. By the end of the week, the 2-acre parcel near the gate was mine. Along with it came the easement language Celeste never thought anyone would read closely enough to understand. Maintenance authority, operational control, emergency procedures, all of it clear, legal, and enforceable. For the first time since this mess started, Celeste wasn't the one holding the board. Now the problem became strategy. I needed to do 3 things, and every one of them mattered. First, I had to prove that Celeste ordered illegal construction on my property, not just morally wrong, legally indefensible. Second, I had to make sure the homeowners understood the truth, that their HOA president had been gambling with the only entrance to their neighborhood while telling them I was the threat. Third, I had to force accountability without turning myself into exactly what Celeste had been calling me all along. That's when Holly found the crack. Digging through records tied to Foxglove Bluffs, she uncovered something Celeste had never disclosed. Celeste wasn't just an HOA president volunteering her time for the good of the community. She owned multiple rental properties inside the subdivision through a private investment company. If my ranch shut down, the land could be rezoned. If it got rezoned, development could expanded. And if development expanded, Celeste stood to make a lot of money. This wasn't about noise. It wasn't about cows. It wasn't about safety. It was about profit. Once that clicked into place, everything Celeste had done made sense. The pressure, the urgency, the theatrics. She wasn't managing a neighborhood. She was executing a business plan. And suddenly, I knew exactly how to expose her. Not with threats, not with yelling, not with revenge, with a controlled, lawful demonstration of reality. I wasn't going to trap families or create chaos. I was going to show them, briefly, safely, unmistakably, what it meant to attack the man who legally controlled the only gate in and out of their world. Because some lessons don't need shouting. They just need one quiet moment where the truth becomes impossible to ignore. We didn't rush. We didn't react emotionally. We treated it like a chess match, not a fist fight, because Holly made one thing clear from the start. The moment you swing wildly, you lose the board. The first move was quiet and precise. Holly filed for an emergency injunction against the wall, backed by photographs, survey maps, and a written statement from Dale at the county records office confirming the exact boundary of my driveway. At the same time, she filed a formal complaint for unpermitted construction. No speeches, no drama. Just paperwork stacked so neatly it couldn't be ignored. The second move was visibility, but controlled. We reached out to a local reporter, Lena Crowell, from a small station that still cared more about facts than clicks. She didn't want theatrics. She wanted documents, timelines, and proof, which worked perfectly for us, because that's exactly what we had. The third move was direct. Holly sent certified letters to every single HOA board member, not just Celeste, every name on that roster. The letters were clear and unemotional. I now owned the parcel that controlled gate operations. Any interference with that easement would result in immediate legal action. No threats, just notice. Celeste responded the way bullies always do when someone finally stands up with evidence instead of fear. She escalated. Within hours, residents received a frantic email blast. According to Celeste, I was threatening to trap families. She claimed I was holding the community hostage. She even hinted that my ranch was under active investigation and implied authorities could shut it down at any moment. That lie mattered more than anything else she'd done so far, because it turned the homeowners into a weapon. Cars started pulling up near the wall. People stood at the edge of my property snapping photos like they were gathering evidence against a criminal. A man I'd never met shouted, "You can't do this to us!" His face was red with anger, but it wasn't really aimed at me. It was fear looking for somewhere to land. I pointed calmly at the steel barrier. I didn't build that. They didn't want to hear it. Celeste had already given them a story, and stories are easier than facts when people are scared. While the neighborhood churned, Celeste made another mistake. She ordered her security team to secure the gate area. New locks appeared, fresh keypad codes, extra cameras. She acted like she could overwrite decades old easement law with a couple of trips to the hardware store. When Holly heard, she actually smiled. It was the first real smile I'd seen from her since this all began. "Good," she said. "Every move she makes is evidence now." Then the county inspector arrived. He came to assess the wall after Holly's filing triggered an expedited review. Celeste showed up too, dressed like she was heading into court. Tailored coat, clipboard clutched tight, expression carefully neutral. She launched into her explanation immediately, talking about safety, community welfare, and emergency concerns. She used all the right buzzwords, hoping confidence alone would carry her through. The inspector didn't look impressed. He walked the length of the wall, took photos, measured distances, checked the fence posts. Then he turned to Celeste. "She doesn't have permits," he said flatly. "And she doesn't own this land." Celeste's face tightened for a split second before she recovered. "We acted in the community's best interest." The inspector didn't argue. He just kept writing. Before he left, he turned to me and asked one question that cut through all the noise. "Do you currently have access to your property?" I looked at the wall. "Not right now." He nodded slowly. "That's going to be a problem," he said. Then he paused and added, "For whoever built it." That sentence did more damage than any argument ever could. That night, Holly and I sat at my kitchen table, papers spread out, coffee going cold. We finalized the plan we'd been circling for days. We were not going to block people for hours. We were not going to endanger anyone. We were not going to become the villains Celeste wanted so badly to paint. Instead, we would do something simple and undeniable. A short, controlled, legally defensible demonstration during rush hour, long enough to be noticed, short enough to be safe, documented from every angle. No yelling, no threats, just reality. We coordinated with Lena so cameras would already be rolling, not hidden, not sneaky, open and honest. We looped in a county traffic official to be present as a neutral witness. Every step documented, every action within the letter of the law. Because this wasn't about chaos, it was about clarity. Celeste believed she could lie faster than the truth could catch her. She believed volume could outrun documentation. She believed fear would always beat facts. She was wrong. The climax wasn't going to hinge on luck or timing or someone bursting in at the perfect moment. It was going to be Celeste, standing in front of the people she thought she controlled, trying to explain her way out of her own words. And this time, there would be nowhere left for her to hide. The day we chose for the demonstration felt heavy before anything even happened. The sky hung low and gray, the kind of Montana afternoon where the clouds press down so hard it feels like the whole valley is holding its breath. There was no wind, no sun, just that quiet, tense with stillness that usually comes right before a storm. I arrived at the gate parcel early with Holly and a county traffic official named Grant Phelps. Grant had agreed to be there as a neutral witness, nothing more, nothing less. Lena, the reporter, parked her car a little distance away, camera already set up, telling anyone who asked that she was doing a routine piece on traffic flow in growing communities. No ambush, no secrecy, everything out in the open. For a while, nothing happened. Cars passed through the gate normally. The subdivision sat quiet up on the ridge. Even I started to feel that familiar knot of doubt tighten in my stomach. Not because the plan wasn't legal, but because moments like this always make you wonder how people will react when reality finally interrupts the story they've been told. Then it hit about 5 in the evening. That familiar rhythm began. Headlights appeared. Commuters coming home. Brake lights stacking up as people slowed for the gate. That was my cue. I reached into the access panel and engaged the manual override, exactly as the easement allowed. The gate finished one last cycle, then stopped opening. At first, drivers assumed it was a glitch. A few cars rolled forward, paused, rolled back. Then horns started to sound. One car, then another. Doors opened. People stepped out, staring at the gate like it had personally betrayed them. Within minutes, the line stretched farther than I expected. And then Celeste arrived. Her white SUV came barreling up, like it had been summoned by the noise. She jumped out before it was fully parked, heels clicking sharp against the pavement, face flushed with anger and urgency. "What do you think you're doing?" she snapped, marching straight toward me like she could still intimidate her way out of this. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't move toward her. I kept my hands visible and my tone even. "I'm operating the gate under the easement," I said. "The easement attached to the parcel I own." Her eyes widened, then narrowed. "That's impossible," she barked, spinning toward the crowd. "Is trying to trap you." "This is criminal." Before the panic could really catch, Grant stepped forward. "Ma'am," he said calmly, "the easement language is clear. Gate operations authority belongs to the parcel owner." Celeste ignored him completely. She pointed at me like a prosecutor addressing a jury. "You don't get exemptions. No one gets exemptions." "That's what the rules are for." I saw Holly glance at me. Just one look. Now? I pulled out a printed stack of papers. The first was an email chain Holly had obtained during discovery. Messages sent directly from Celeste, approving the wall construction and bragging about how it would force him out. I held them up where anyone close could see the headers, her name repeated again and again. Then I lifted the second document, the county record showing my driveway property line, followed by the formal complaint detailing the unpermitted construction. Celeste's mouth opened, closed. Then she lunged for a pivot. "That was a clerical error," she said quickly. "A previous board." "No," Holly cut in, sharp and precise. "Your name is on every approval." Lena's camera zoomed in. You could hear the soft mechanical whir over the rising murmur of the crowd. People leaned closer. Faces shifted from anger to confusion, from confusion to suspicion. It felt like a tide turning underfoot. I took a breath and spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. "I didn't come here to punish families," I said. "I came here because she built a steel wall on my land to trap my ranch, then told all of you that I was the threat. She wanted you angry at me, so you wouldn't ask why you only have one way in or out of your own neighborhood." I let that sink in, then looked straight at Celeste. And she did all of it while running a property investment company inside this neighborhood. That was the moment everything changed. The murmuring turned sharp. Someone gasped. A woman near the front shouted, "Is that true?" Celeste went rigid. Her jaw tightened. "That's irrelevant," she snapped. "It's the whole reason," I said quietly. Grant cleared his throat, glancing at his notes. "Mom," he said, "the county is also investigating the unpermitted construction." For just a second, Celeste's mask cracked. Not anger, not arrogance. Because in that instant she understood what had really happened. Her steel wall had been theater. My gate was reality, after exactly the agreed amount of time. Short, controlled, safe. I disengaged the override. The gate began cycling again. Cars rolled forward. Engines hummed. No one was hurt. No one was trapped. But something else had happened that couldn't be undone. The story had flipped. People didn't leave angry at me. They didn't leave thinking I'd threatened their families. They left realizing they'd been lied to, and that the person who claimed to protect them had gambled with their trust. Celeste stood there as the crowd thinned, smaller somehow, her clipboard hanging useless at her side. And I knew right then that no matter what came next, she had already lost. The fallout hit faster than I ever expected, like the truth had been waiting for the smallest crack to rush through. Within a day, Lena's report aired across the county. The headline wasn't flattering, and more importantly, it wasn't vague. HOA president accused of illegal construction and conflict of interest. The framing mattered. This wasn't a story about a stubborn rancher causing trouble. It was about HOA leadership weaponizing rules, abusing authority, and gambling with an entire community's access for personal gain. That single shift changed everything. Residents started asking questions, real ones. Not the panicked, emotional kind Celeste had relied on, but sharp, uncomfortable questions that demanded answers. Emails flooded the HOA inbox. Phone calls went unanswered. Board members who'd happily rubber-stamped Celeste's decisions suddenly realized their names were attached to documents they'd never fully read. Holly moved fast. Motions were filed. The county issued a formal stop work order on the wall and levied fines for unpermitted construction. A licensed surveyor confirmed what we already knew: the HOA had built directly on my property line. Their insurance company took one look at the findings and refused coverage outright. No permit, no protection, no escape hatch. Celeste tried to rally the board, but something fundamental had changed. Board members weren't nodding along anymore. They were whispering to each other, checking their phones, doing mental math. They weren't worried about my cattle now. They were worried about lawsuits, property values, and whether their own homes might suffer because they'd trusted the wrong person. Then came a moment that caught me completely off guard. Late one afternoon, a truck I didn't recognize pulled into my driveway. A couple stepped out, mid-30s nervous posture, holding a casserole dish like a peace offering. They introduced themselves as Noah and Tessa Brandt, residents of Foxglove Bluffs. We believed her, Tessa said quietly. We really did. We thought you were the problem. No, didn't look up. We didn't know she was using us. I didn't feel any satisfaction in that moment. No urge to say I told you so. Mostly I felt tired, because the truth was, most of the people up on that ridge weren't villains. They were scared, missiled, and pushed in a direction that served someone else's agenda. I told them they were welcome anytime, that the ranch had always been there, that it wasn't going anywhere. A special HOA meeting was scheduled soon after, and this time, the turnout was impossible to ignore. The room was packed wall to wall, standing room only. People filled the aisles and leaned against the back wall. The energy was different, not angry, but alert. Celeste stood at the front with her clipboard, but she didn't command the room anymore. She was being watched closely, like a defendant. Questions came fast. Someone asked about her investment company. Someone else asked why the subdivision had only one entrance. Another asked who approved and paid for the steel wall. Celeste tried to answer, but her voice kept rising, losing that calm confidence she'd always relied on. Every explanation sounded thinner than the last. Then Holly stood up. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't dramatize anything. She simply laid out the facts. We are pursuing damages for illegal obstruction of private property, she said, as well as harassment and attempted lien abuse. She paused, letting the words settle. And I want the board to understand something very clearly. This doesn't end with a slap on the wrist. This ends with accountability. Celeste snapped. She accused me of destroying the community. She claimed I'd manipulated the media. She tried to turn the room back into a battlefield where she could play the hero. That's when the door opened. Clifford Raines walked in. The old man didn't look angry. He didn't look triumphant. He looked tired, like someone who'd watched this exact mistake unfold too many times before. He didn't give a speech. He didn't argue. He held up a copy of the original easement paperwork and said one sentence. I warned your developer years ago not to build a kingdom on someone else's gate. The room went silent. That was it. That single sentence carried more weight than every email, fine, and threat that had come before it. It connected the past to the present in a way no one could ignore. Within days, residents demanded a vote of no confidence. Celeste was removed as HOA president. A new interim board was formed, led by a steady, practical woman named Marla Quinn. One of her first actions was reaching out to Holly to begin settlement discussions. No posturing, no excuses. The settlement terms were clear. The wall would be removed. Damages would be paid. Transparency rules would be enforced. Open records, independent audits, and strict limits on board members with undisclosed financial interests. For the first time in months, my ranch felt quiet again. Not just physically, but emotionally. The pressure was gone. The constant vigilance eased. But the change went beyond my fence line. The community itself was waking up, and Celeste, she wasn't done falling. Because once the county started digging, really digging, into permits, finances, and communications, they began uncovering things she never expected anyone to look for. The kind of things that don't disappear when a title is taken away. The kind of things that follow you long after the clipboard is gone. A few weeks after the wall came down, I stood at the end of my driveway just before sunrise and watched my cattle move through the morning mist the same way they always had. Slow, steady, unbothered. The steel was gone. The fake warning signs were gone, and the quiet felt different this time, not empty, but settled. Like the land could finally breathe again after holding its breath for too long. Foxglove Bluffs didn't vanish. The houses were still there. Lights still came on at night. People still walked their dogs along the ridge and drove past my fence on their way to town. Some waved. Some didn't. But the tension was gone. Not instantly and not perfectly, but enough that it mattered. Enough that things felt normal again. My dad used to say something when I was younger, something I never really understood until all of this happened. The loudest people in the room are usually the ones standing on the weakest ground. Celeste built her authority on fear, paperwork, and performance. She thought power meant control. She thought control meant walls. But real power doesn't come from shouting louder or stacking more rules on top of people. It comes from knowing what's real, what's legal, and what was true long before someone showed up with a clipboard and decided they knew better. I never wanted to punish a neighborhood. I never wanted to hurt families or make anyone's life harder. I just refused to let one person rewrite my life because it didn't fit her image of perfection. If there's one thing I hope people take from this, it's simple: read the documents, know your rights, and don't let bullies convince you that compliance is the same thing as peace. If you want to hear more true stories like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button to HOA Gone Wild. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from?